Okay, now we are expecting some stragglers to walk in later on, so we may see some other faces on the panel as the show rolls on, and we will just have some fun when they walk in the door. So if you see people randomly walking in and we start talking, that's what happens as this episode goes forward. But we're going to start off with the Iron Maiden self-titled debut record, 9 tracks, 40 minutes. I said the debut studio from the UK metal band, released April 1980 via EMI and Harvest Capital. Produced by Will Malone, recorded at Kingsway Studios in England. 2 studios were released in Running Free and Sanctuary, taking the album to number 4 in the UK and charting reasonably well across Europe, going platinum in the UK, Canada and gold in Germany. This was the only album to be produced with Malone, who was the 3rd producer the band attempted to work with, and even the band pretty much self-produced this by bypassing him and using the energy in themselves. This is also the only album with guitarist Dennis Stratton. Nick?
Okay, so I heard... the debut album after really getting into Number of the Beast. I went back through the back catalogue, and the thing that I loved about Number of the Beast was Bruce. So when I heard this, I thought I was listening to a completely separate band. So I was expecting to hear Bruce, but I heard Paul Di'Anno. It sounded like a completely different band because to me it sounded more punk, more raw.
Yeah.
And to be honest, at the time I didn't really like it because for me Bruce was probably the main element in Maiden for me, just my listening.
Yeah.
It didn't sound like what they would become later on, as we probably all know. For example, but it had some moments in there. For example, you mentioned Running Free was a single there. To me, that wasn't even a metal song. For me, that was almost like a boogie-woogie pop song sort of thing with a finger in the background.
We're off to a flyer.
That's how I would have described it.
No, it just it didn't sound, but very bluesy as well. It didn't sound like what I thought metal song would be. Because don't forget, I came from a Number of the Beast and gone backwards, so it was completely different for me. So that kind of stuff I didn't like when I first heard it. But
bit of punk in there too.
Yeah, very raw, very punky.
Yeah.
But the more I listened to it over the years, the more I actually grew to actually appreciate and love this album. It's got some gems on it. The one that I actually wrote down was Strange World, which that starts off as a ballad. Then you can see Paul Di'Anno showing off his softer side. Then it becomes a bit of a pretty rocker, bit of a ball terror for me. So I actually absolutely loved it. So long story short, it took me a while to get into it, but when I did, I fell for it in a big way. So at the time, while they still had little ways to go and they weren't quite there where they would become, I went from actually, like I say, not liking the album to actually thinking it's actually probably one of the debut albums that really hasn't got many subpar tracks on it.
Okay.
So my listening and my just appreciation of the album really changed over the time there. So as a debut album, it's a great start. Even though I went backwards, so for me it really wasn't the debut. Standout tracks. Transylvania. Now anyone who knows me knows I hate instrumental tracks, but I love that track.
Okay. Wow. Where's Nick and what are you doing with him?
Exactly. Sorry, Mum, I promise I won't be angry anymore on TV. Running Free, I mentioned. Phantom of the Opera, great track, and also Strange World. So, look, if I was doing this a couple of years back, I would have given this maybe a 5, 6 out of 10. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10 because I love it. I really enjoy it.
Cool. Being we're of similar vintage, I think we all are, so we probably had a similar experience. I didn't get onto this till after. I sort of was, Number of the Beast, Peace of Mind, Power Slave, and then went back to these ones.
I was aware of it, but didn't really explore it.
And much like yourself, didn't grab me at the time. I love them much more now. And it's funny, we're probably all going to use the word punk in there, that it has that sort of punk edge. Steve Harris apparently hates punk, in all its forms.
But it wasn't him, it was Paul Di'Anno that brought that.
Yeah, I guess so, but even the songs are rawer. They're not the classic Maiden that they went on to be. It's even more chordsy driven stuff, and it's a very different band. It is almost a completely different sound and band to what they would become.
Dennis Stratton on the guitar had a bit to do with that as well.
Yeah. But it's funny with Steve Harris is so opposed to punk that even Eddie on the cover looks pretty punk. So the spiky hair and earrings and all that kind of stuff. So it's a bit of an interesting thing.
It would fit right to a cyberpunk kind of a...
Absolutely, but this album, much like yourself, has grown on me over the years, and it really does. It's one of my favourites just to listen to now, and I think it's partly due to that simplicity about it. It's a different band, and for a debut album, it's so strong. I mean, a lot of these albums were on demo tapes and stuff that were doing the rounds in Birmingham or wherever the hell they were from, something like that. For a long time, sort of before it got to this point. So it's a debut album, but it was pretty well developed and thought through by the time they got to it. I love it. I gave this 9 out of 10 because I still really enjoy listening to it. Remember Tomorrow is one of my favourite Maiden songs of all time. Metallica even did a cover of it recently. It's really cool. I think it's on the bonus disc of the Hardwired one.
I think. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Running Free, of course, classic one live, and Iron Maiden, the song.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
Yeah, love it.
Well, like I said in the intro and stuff, that I listened to a lot of the remastered listens to this, but even for remaster, this is pretty raw sounding. It's very clean and crisp, but it's got a raw edge to it. And while it's aged, it's actually pretty well balanced, especially when you consider what was happening in this year when the band are self-producing through an engineer. This actually has a pretty good mix to it.
I think so.
I thought, when you go back in hindsight, Deanna was the right vocalist for these songs, and it's the punk attitude that he brings. Even though Steve Harris might hate it, it's the attitude that he brings to it. It gives the band a feel that's more from the streets, and for the UK at that time, it was really vibrant. You can see how they got such a good following on the back of his work with the band at the time. The lyrics go hand in hand with that as well. It's a little bit fast and loose at times. They're not nailed down with the precision that we come to know from the band later on. But it adds energy, which is fun, and it can pump you up. That's the kind of stuff it is here. There are some fantastic solos on this record. Even little touches of the dual guitar work are starting to be found here. Not as prevalent as it is later on, but it's starting here. And there's some nice use of subtle effects going here, and it's nice to see how the bass comes through on this release. The guitars might be a little bit pushed back. They lack a little punch for me, even though it sounds like the mids were scooped a little bit on this one, which I found odd, but Steve Harris controlling things. Whenever he gets control, the bass tends to come a bit too forward, for my opinion.
A bit indicative of the time, too. I think the guitar sound, they hadn't quite got that... No bands had quite got how to get distorted guitar right yet.
And don't forget,
it came a couple of years later.
It was also the end of the punk era as well, and punk's notorious for pushing guitars in the
pretty
background.
fucking tone.
Not as just more like an overdriven sort of a bit of a
That's another debate for us, I reckon.
Save it for the Black Sabbath.
I'll do another one of those. There's a nice, well thought out track order, bits of menace in this as well, which is really cool. Paul isn't quite as convincing on the epic tracks, which is why you know how they made the change to Bruce later on. He's serviceable without being brilliant in those ones. But you can certainly see how these songs are meant for the live circuit. They would have been well received at the time, and the youthful exuberance they have is very infectious on this release. Performers are solid, a little loose like I said earlier, but they are still cohesive, which carries the album well. There are some pitfalls, however. For me, tracks like Phantom of the Opera, they show that this time their ambition outweighed their ability in some respects. You can see what they're trying to get. They don't quite get there. Plenty of potential and space for growth, but still some improvement needed. And it's one of those cases where you can see it, but they don't quite nail it. And after a while, the emphasis on the bass, especially when it's cutting over the top of lead guitar and drums, that gets a bit annoying. The novelty kind of wears off pretty quickly into the it impacts the overall balance of the sound for me. Instrumentals like Transylvania, they fly against those previous notes though, and bring the album back to life for me in a big way. That's more like it as far as I'm concerned when it comes to this band. I always love the balls putting an instrumental on a debut album. It's underdone. I think a lot more bands could sort of think about that a bit more. All in all, it's a solid debut, quite well done, but you can see the room for improvement as there are times to me like that. It feels like they're trying just a little bit too hard with the way they've written it. But that said, there are some truly iconic songs in there well worth adding to your collection. I gave it 7.5 out of 10. I picked Transylvania as well, then Prowler, Running Free, and Iron Maiden. So check it out for yourselves. Let us know what you think.